Orbis Campfire Sessions. It's so good to be back. My name is Kim Keene. I'm the Director of Marketing. It's great to be back around the fire. It's been a minute. We're coming to you live from Charlotte, North Carolina at our Orbis offices. And I think for the first time ever in Campfire history, Campfire has gone international. We've got quite a bit of interest for this session, which has been great. So we have expanded the capacity of this session, and we're so excited to have so many new folks join us today. And because we've got quite a bit of new folks on, I want to take just a quick minute to run through and give you a download about who we are at Orbis and what we do. So we are a technology company. We work predominantly in the natural resources and land asset management industries, and we provide services from everything from data management, GIS services, rec lease management, property taxes, and other custom solutions. So Campfire Sessions is something that we started a few years ago to just help bring the community together and talk openly about hot topics like artificial intelligence, which we're going to talk about today, and other happenings in the industry. So most of the time we do this virtually like we're doing today, and sometimes we do this live, and it's a lot of fun. But either way, we try to just keep it lively and fun and really laid back. And so we hope that today, not only is it informative and you guys get a lot out of this, but that you also have fun with it as well. So let's get into it. So we can't avoid this topic any longer. And at this point, it's infiltrated so much of our day-to-day lives, from our smartphones and from Siri and Alexa, who at this point are like virtual assistants to many of us. Face recognition, social media, and the list goes on and on and on. Artificial intelligence is everywhere, and it's in everything. And we know more and more business sectors are starting to integrate AI into their services and workflows. But what about forestry and land management? What have we begun to do or not do when it comes to the technology? Well, today's Campfire Session is all about addressing that topic and hopefully helping us leave here with a little bit of a better understanding about how it's being used and what's going on and the trends in that. So a little housekeeping before we get started. We're going to open the floor for Q&A at the end of the session. So you can submit your questions in the chat window or the Q&A window that you see there on your screen. And be sure to say who you want your question directed to, and we'll get to those at the end. And because we're Orbis, and again, if you're new, just know that we love to give stuff away. We've got some cool, exciting new prizes, and so stick around at the end for those, and we'll do some fun drawings. We've also got some poll questions running, so if you click on the poll tab that you see there, make sure you get your questions submitted, and we definitely want to do some dialogue around those responses there. Okay, so let's jump in and meet our panel for today. First up, we've got Robert Andresen. He's the IT director for PotlatchDeltic Corporation. So with over 10 years at Potlatch, Robert has extensive experience leading cutting-edge digital transformation to optimize purchasing, manufacturing, and maintenance programs. And during his time with Potlatch, he's not only helped to turn around underperforming business units and enable scaled growth, but Robert has also championed the adoption of new technologies and processes across organizational levels. He's managed enterprise-wide IT strategies across 3 separate business units with 1,500 users. Robert, thank you so much for being here today. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thanks. It's great to be here. Appreciate it.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, Jeremy is up next. Jeremy Jones is a consultant forester and the co-founder of Rexico. He has a broad background that includes not only working with and understanding cellulosic raw materials, supply chains, sustainability, and biomass, but also how to best apply technology to each of these components to create effective solutions. Jerry's professional certifications include ISAE 3000, Open LCA Intermediate, ISO 14064, Risk Management DoD System Support, and Lean Six Sigma. I don't know what any of that means, but it all sounds very important, Jeremy. So welcome. Jeremy also holds an MBA in fraud management from Utica University, a Bachelor of Science in Forestry, and a Bachelor of Science in Economics from Louisiana Tech. Thank you for being here, Jeremy.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah. Awesome. And next up, we've got Christian Montez. He's the Director of Forest Systems for Rayonier. And prior to this role, Christian had managed teams in forest modeling, remote sensing, digital soil mapping, silviculture, tree breeding, and nursery development. His career includes extensive work with Arauco. Am I saying that right, Christian?
Arauco, yeah.
Arauco, the University of Georgia, the Plantation Management Research Cooperative, and World Bank. And some of his latest projects have focused on combining traditional forest modeling with artificial intelligence. He has a Master's of Science in Forestry and a PhD in Forestry and Natural Resources with an emphasis in biomathematics and growth modeling. Welcome, Christian, to Campfire Sessions.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah. Sweet. And last, we've got Dr. Alicia Pajuzzi. She has received her PhD in forestry from Virginia Tech. Her research focus is on applying remote sensing science to vegetation assessment and management of natural resources, with a particular emphasis on developing methodologies for precision forestry. She started as an assistant professor in precision forestry at UGA's Warnell School of Forestry and Natural Resources in August 2020. And before that, she worked for the USDA Forest Service, the Woodwell Climate Research Center, and the World Bank. And over the years, Dr. Pajuzzi has worked with pine plantations in the Southeast, as well as with temperate and tropical natural forests. And her remote sensing expertise includes the utilization of LiDAR, radar, and optical data derived from satellites, airborne, and unmanned aerial vehicles. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Very
Awesome.
excited, very looking forward for the discussion today.
Awesome. Yeah, great to have you. It's awesome. So I want to kick things off a little bit differently. Normally, we start the panel discussion with just one panelist, but I want to keep you guys all up here and go ahead and do things a little different, because this topic is so, there's so many different elements to it. It's generated so much buzz. So I have to imagine some of that buzz or some of that interest is because of the prevalence that AI is beginning to have in so much of our day-to-day lives that I mentioned earlier. But then I also wonder if some of it is because AI is kind of a newer technology and maybe folks aren't as familiar with it, or they're just curious about it. So regardless, I will say, as I was preparing for this session, and I was trying to research and see what information was out there, I was overwhelmed with definitely information overload. There's so much out there as far as like the different versions of AIs, the different interpretations of AIs and what it means, the different forms, the different branches, the sub-branches and subcategories. And it was definitely daunting. So with that said, I want to turn to you guys and ask for your thoughts, and if y'all can provide a simplistic definition or breakdown of artificial intelligence. Is there an easy way that you would recommend, like for our audience, to understand or digest artificial intelligence? Does somebody want to jump in and take a stab at that?
Sure. I'll jump in since it's what I do every day. I would say it's a stochastic parrot that's extraordinarily good at Merkle trees.
Okay, now I said digestible, Jeremy, and I don't understand a word of that.
Okay. It's like an autocomplete in your email or your Word document that's really good at big pattern recognition.
Okay. Anybody got anything to add to that?
I would add that what we understand as artificial intelligence is something that is not new in forestry. It's just that there are different flavors of it. And the latest fast on it is because of this ChatGPT erupting in the environment, and everybody's is so excited about it, and it sounds like a scary thing because it's hard to understand what's it. Artificial intelligence is nothing more than allowing the computer to take a bunch of data and make a forecast either as a number or as an idea or as a phrase or as a document or as a something. That data could be an image that then it does do a forecast on what that image should be, or you can put words and the computer will do a forecast on what the image should be to that thing, or the music or something. But it's essentially giving the computer power over artificial thinking with the probabilities.
Okay, I like that. Robert, Alicia?
I would say, I mean, I've always looked at this as the intersection of computer science and math, or statistical math computation components. And it really is, as Christian said, it's training these algorithms on large sets of data so that they can recognize and increasingly get better at recognize or classifying or predicting things over time. And whether that's an image or whether that's text, both of those are in play here in our businesses.
That makes sense. Got it.
Yeah, and I think that I would add, I like to think about it as systems that tend to, we train them to act and to think like humans. So we are, from the beginning, expecting them to give us an output that we normally would do as humans. So that's the whole idea. But I will echo all the concepts from the point of view of it's not just hardware, but also could be methodologies. So it could be just systems or complete. And from our point of view in forestry is all these systems that can allow us to give us a product or information at the end that we could use for our daily operations.
Great. Yeah, I think, Alicia, what you started off was the closest thing to what I found. Something that I thought summed it up well, I came across, said the simulation of human intelligence by a machine. And I was like, okay, that's the most simplistic form, or that helps me, simulation of human intelligence by a machine. That I can digest and think about, and then everything else, all the jargon can flow out of that. So thank you for your input, everybody, on that. So hopefully that was helpful to folks as we start to dive deeper into the conversation and get started there. So let's leave Robert up here and start with him, and then we'll come back to everybody else first. So Robert, piggybacking off of the definition of AI that we talked about, when most people think about AI, they're probably thinking about it in terms of generative AI. So can you help clarify the difference between generative, that word is getting stuck in me, generative AI, imagery, and other forms of the technology?
Sure. So let me start by saying, my background isn't AI. I'm not a data scientist. I'm definitely not an AI model creator. But I do have experience looking at applications and looking for return, looking for value, looking for risk. And, generative AI right now, it's getting all the press, like you said. I mean, it's been hard to avoid this rocket ship over the last 18 months that started with the release of ChatGPT in late November of 2022. And a lot of folks were jumping on the bandwagon. There's been a lot of investment in this space. But AI as a concept has been around for a long time. And we've had commercially viable applications since the late 90s and early 2000s. And it really started with what I would call the workhorse of artificial intelligence, which is machine learning. It's really the simplest form of artificial intelligence. It's what is driving things like recommendation systems that you see in online shopping, Amazon, for example. It's what's driving, as you mentioned, the social media feeds, recommendations, and connections within your Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook accounts. It's the technology behind digital assistants. And it really is what's laid the groundwork for the evolution, because it is an evolution of generative AI, which has really been what's been getting the press for the last 18 months or so.
Yeah.
And so generative AI is building on that concept of machine learning algorithms. They arrange them in a specific set of patterns that really mimic that human brain. And one of the unique components of generative AI is it's used to really generate original content. And we're seeing it and we're using it in our business in a lot of different ways. We're using the text-based applications like ChatGPT or Copilot from Microsoft or Bard from Google to do things like content generation around job descriptions or development plans, or memo writing or policy writing. We're using it from a software coding perspective to generate code, to evaluate code. We're looking at situations from testing. We use it a lot in ideation, so think of it as a search engine on steroids.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of opportunity out there. It's a very fast moving space. I think we all are seeing that now, and it's evolving very, very quickly with new applications coming out daily, where it seems like you just can't keep pace on where the generative AI tools are and what what's coming up next.
Right. Yeah, I can definitely see where it's helpful in that creative space and the ideation space that you mentioned, and just helping get those creative juices flowing, or bringing just another brain to the table, so to speak. And you talked about Chat GPT. I think that's probably the one that folks are most familiar with. And I did read a stat that mentioned, that within the first 2 months of that app launching, they amassed over 100 million users. And so it was the fastest growing app by far in history. That's wild to think about. So yeah, definitely moving at a very quick pace. So I appreciate you chiming in there. Thank you, Robert. Alicia, let's bring you up real quick and get your thoughts on a couple things. So, Alicia, your background includes time at the U.S. Forest Service and as a World Bank technical advisor. So tell me a little bit about these experiences and how that kind of led to what you're doing now at UGA.
Yeah, well, my position at UGA is as a precision forestry professor, and that title itself refers to very high resolution type of data and high resolution type of products. And during my time in the Forest Service and at the World Bank, I was mostly working with tropical forest, and most of the work was done at a very large scale and also very high resolution. So that work was part of the reason why I'm here, but also was the combination with my research during my graduate master's degree and then PhD degrees. That I work mostly with plantations in the Southeast. And I work also with LiDAR data, which at that time was very high resolution. Not anymore. Now we have better sensors and more resolution. But then we can talk more about that later. But it was mostly because of that. The precision forestry position is now working with UAVs, which is the newest technology. So we're having a large amount of data, much more than we used to have in remote sensing. And of course, because of that, we're using more technologies related with artificial intelligence or any computer science algorithms to process faster and more accurate our analysis. So it's a combination of all that, plantations and probably my broad knowledge in tropical forest too. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. And kind of piggybacking off of that, I do want to learn more about that particular work that even the students are doing, using that high resolution remote sensing data in the agricultural space, and specifically on the plantations in the South. So can you expand on that? And then also, so when it comes to remote sensing and the imagery side of AI, I read something to where like that data, the way that it's showing up or computed is in as numbers, or it shows up as numbers, or can you like explain a little bit more on that? And that's how it's like getting input into the system, or help us understand that better?
Sure. So with precision forestry, I started working with UAVs, and basically UAVs. It was until now that we have advanced a lot in technology, not only having development in better UAVs and larger and with more weight load capacities, but also we have reduced the size of our sensors. And we can have installed all these sensors and have them on board UAVs and collect data. So that compared to what we were doing before with airborne LiDAR or airborne data acquired, it is this huge amount of data. Now we are multiplying exponentially the amount of the size of those files, and also the processing time for all that, because the more resolution we have, we usually say in remote sensing that high resolution could also be a nightmare and a curse, because now you have more noise and more problems. It's so excited to see a pixel, and then you can see the details of everything. A pixel of a resolution of 3 centimeters by 3 centimeters, you can see it all, but because you see it all, now you have a lot more noise for modeling development that is harder to separate and get to our objective. So anyway, so for example, in agriculture, I have students that we have been doing plant segmentation. We have a project with peanut crops, and suddenly we had thousands of polygons because we're doing individual plant segmentation. And then per plants, we are generating all our variables to use for modeling purposes of either productivity or crop height, etc. Any of the variables that we're interested, or the parameters that we're interested for management purposes. So with all that, that brings all these problems with the size of the capacity of your computers, the size of your storage. And of course, how can you, with all the data, how can you separate all that? So then you have to start investigating of different types of methodologies and algorithms that can help you with it. So those are one of the things. And related with your question of you mentioned about the
I was just curious of how it was like showing up.
Yes. So 4 pixels, usually what we have for an image is that each pixel would represent, will give you a digital number. And that digital number is, we call it raw data, and then we have to convert that to reflectance. And that reflectance is what we use to generate vegetation indices or generate other indices that related probably from the bands directly, the wavelengths, the different wavelengths that we have. And then evaluate the relationships that those have with the particular variables or parameters that we're looking for. It could be forest health, it could be vigor, it could be something related with the amount of density of leaves that we have for that vegetation, okay? In the case of other sensors, like let's say LiDAR, every single point or every single return is basically a value of height. And then we convert that into height above the ground. And then from there, we generate variables. But yes, there are always numbers, and that's how we can work with mathematical operations and statistical analysis, and then get results from there.
Wow, that's fascinating. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, let's bring Jeremy up. Alicia, we're going to come back to you in just a bit if we can get Jeremy on. Jeremy, I would like for you to give us a brief overview of Rexico. What is it and what do you do?
Sure, and I'll try to be quick. So we had this idea of trying to implement AI in the space where it could add the most value. And we didn't think that having a free admin assistant was the most valuable way to use it. So we are working with multiple nested models to create, for those of you who are on this side of the industry, essentially a wood dealer, an AI wood dealer. And we're working through the challenges with that, which are significant. But I wanted to take a minute to try to add some measurable value to the makers who are on this call. I see Mark down in the chat. And so I thought this might help. Anybody on the call can go do the same thing. All you have to do, and I'm going to give you the steps to do it so that you all can learn and become an expert. There's no better way of learning and doing than like actually going to try to make one. So go to Hugging Face, create yourself an account, and you'll see hundreds of foundation models to choose from. All of them are free. Things like BERT, things like Llama, GPT 3.5, pick one. And they've got little descriptions in there that tell you what they can do. So once you pick your model, you can download it onto your computer, and then you can search in GitHub. So go to GitHub, you can ask Copilot, which is integrated in GitHub, and find a repo, a repository in GitHub that does the thing that you want it to do. For example, we were playing around. You can take all your cruising data and you can take all your remote sensing data and you can mash it in AWS in a data lake with something called BERT, which is pretty good at math, put a little bit of Wolfram in it. All of this stuff, you can Google it. You can copy all the code right off of the GitHub repos. You can do all of this on your home computer. Every one of you on this call have the ability to go do this. Like, it's super, super easy. And then you can start playing around with your own AI. And you can have something every bit as good as GPT 3.5, so the original Chat GPT, sitting on your home computer. And you can feed it things like, hey, what is it going to tell me about my remote sensing data? Hey, here's all my cruising data. What is it going to spit back out again? And you can start to learn kind of what AI looks like and how it works. And it's super, super easy and very accessible through Hugging Face and GitHub and AWS and all of these tools that are available. And ChatGPT will even help you with the code. So I would encourage everybody to kind of follow along with what we've been doing at Rexico. We've decided that we want to make an AI wood dealer, right? That's kind of our thing that we're working towards. And we followed this same process that I'm describing to you all to get to where we are, which is like way down the road. We've been working on it for almost 2 years, but anybody can do it. And I would encourage everyone to do that. And if you have any questions, our website, I think our contact information is in the chat somewhere, or maybe you can go to our website. I'm always happy to help, always happy to answer questions. This community of forest professionals is where I grew up. And so I'm more than happy to help anybody out.
Sweet. Thank you. Now, when you say easy, I imagine like
so let me put that in perspective. My 11-year-old daughter did this entire thing from start to finish, and it has the text messages she gets from her friends are being auto responded to with her own little GPT. I promise you, if my 11-year-old daughter can do it, everybody on this call can do it. Just go out there, Hugging Face, GitHub, AWS, get down and dirty with it. You'll see that it's super easy, and then you'll really start to learn, and the applications are remarkable. And it's hard to describe sitting here from 2 years down the road. It's kind of like somebody who's been cruising timber for 30 years trying to tell a college forestry student like what it's like. It's a good day in the woods is a really good day. And that's hard to describe. And it's very similar working with AI, that sometimes you have these moments that are kind of almost religious, but I would encourage everyone to do this. Everybody on the call can do it.
Wow. Okay. He's a big proponent of it. Be sure you don't work for them, Jeremy?
No, just trying to help everybody. We started our own thing, and everybody else can too.
Nice. Awesome. Okay. I've been seeing more and more lately things about EUDR or the European deforestation regulation. Yeah. And with that, I want to touch a little bit on compliance. Can you give everybody out there a brief overview of what the regulation is? And then how are you seeing clients adapting to the concept of AI supporting their compliance needs, and specifically to that EUDR regulation?
Wow, I could talk all day about this. I'll try to be brief. As you mentioned, most of what I do is consulting. Tons and tons and tons of clients want to talk about EUDR. There was this huge panic when it first came out, rightfully so. Now the smart money is betting on the fact that it's going to be postponed. Regardless, it's going to happen. EUDR, there are hundreds. So one of the things that we had to build before we decided to build our current product as you see it, we were building kind of these bespoke AI models. And one of our clients said, hey, build us a EUDR compliance AI model. And we did. And we learned a lot. There are hundreds, literally hundreds of regulations that are applicable to and tangential to EUDR. One of the things we learned is that those regulations are kind of nested and they're kind of in these branching tree structures. And so one regulation will call out to 5 other regulations that'll call out to 5 more. And it gets, the graph, if you would, gets really complex, which is one of the reasons why AI is very helpful, because AI works off of a vector database anyway. And that's kind of what you have to do when you're trying to search regulations anyway. And so it all works out. And AI does a phenomenal job. We actually took one of the modules that we built that didn't go to a customer and we incorporated it into our current product, which is available for free for everybody. I would encourage you to try it. You can type in there, what is EUDR? And they'll give you all the lists and all the stuff, and you can kind of look through it. The way that AI is useful in compliance is that it's very challenging to stay current. And it's also very challenging, especially for the mom and pop operators. Like if you're operating a hardwood sawmill, you're going to get crushed by EUDR. It's very challenging to know kind of how to be compliant. And these AI tools are really good for that, which is part of the reason we made ours available for free so that folks can start to go and learn. And so again, my previous answer, anybody can do it. You can download all the regs, you put it into what's called a RAG. There's a repo out there for all the different RAGs, and there's lots of instruction. Very, very easy. But one of the things that everyone should know about a EUDR is that it will eventually happen. And unlike SFI and FSC that have been largely accounting exercises and really just kind of glorified stuff that we were already doing for, gosh, my grandfather's time, EUDR is different. It's actually going to change things. And in a very simple thing that I've been telling everybody to kind of a go, no go, you can't cut down old hardwood trees. That's pretty much the bottom line with EUDR. We have some unresolved conversations around what the technical definition of degenerate means and degenerating the forest and going and back and, hey, what did it used to be and things like that. But a short answer is, if you've got a 200-year-old hardwood tree sitting in a bottomland somewhere, it's never going to be EUDR compliant. Does that help?
That does help. Yeah, interesting. Okay. I want you to keep that nugget you said earlier about the mom and pops being able to access it or do it, or the sawmills or whatever you said, because that's going to come up later in Our Heart Are Not Round, and something that I want to talk about, and I want to get your thoughts on that. So hang on to that. We're going to come back.
Sure. Happy to.
All right. Thank you, Jeremy. Yeah. Christiane, you're up next in our hot seat. So join us by the fire, if you will. Christiane, I want you to start off. Just tell me about your role at Rayonier and what you do. Give me a little quick download.
Oh, I'm in charge of the biometrics team. So we are improving system and developing system that allow us to forecast what the forest is going to be like in the coming years, methods to improve our forest inventory and planning, and improving our ways to merchandise the stands in a mathematical way so that we can forecast, again, how much revenue we're going to get out of a particular forest. That's what I've been doing here since I got to Rayonier.
Wow, that's awesome. Okay. And in your experience so far, how have you seen AI applied in forestry and land management? And how do you think those applications compare to the conventional methods?
Well, again, as I said before, AI is something that is not new in forestry. Before, we used to call it unsupervised or supervised classification methods that were very popular in GIS applications, as Alicia said. They just, the methods or the mathematics was hidden, and we didn't give them fancy names as we provide them now. It is more like recently that deep learning, which is one of the methods that has been used, and particularly for large language models. Those things is something that we have not applied yet, but most of the things that we have done is taking a whole bunch of data, passing them through something that is this black box called machine learning, or in some cases some AI, and getting some output out of that. And the majority of applications came from the remote sensing arena. How do you see what the satellite is actually giving you? And many satellites will give you different shades of light reflection, and you need to make something out of that. That is one way. Then there is a radar information that is also from the ground, being able to tell how much yield you have. Then there is the satellite, of course, that is also there. The LiDAR it's been the one that has been the favorite tool by many practitioners, but the one that has not been implemented practically very accurately. So we're still not able to replace our traditional inventories with LiDAR, but we're working towards that using these new algorithms that were developed for AI.
Gotcha. Cool. And you touched a little bit on machine learning. Can you help us understand that a little bit more? I know we mentioned it too back when we were talking about the overall definition of AI earlier at the session. Can you break down AI, explain it, and then also talk about the advantages or disadvantages of it?
Well, machine learning is the simplest thing to understand. I assume most of the people that are hearing this broadcast is they have used Excel spreadsheets, and you will have a column of something you're interested, and you have a whole bunch of variables that are related to that column. In the old days, we use regression for that. That is actually in every textbook for machine learning. That's the first method you have to know about machine learning, being able to predict that single column out of many other things. Well, in machine learning, there is linear regression, of course. Then you can go non-linear when you're modeling some slightly different things. You can have other things that are called support vector machine that allow you to classify all these columns into different groups. You can have a random forest, another classification method. You can have a gradient boosting, extreme gradient boosting. There's many of these things. But again, the sole objective is predicting either one column or multi-columns. Then you go to the next step, which is doing some of the artificial neural networks that take not only that try to break not only one thing or two things, they try to break many things at the same time. And that's been the one application that, because of cloud computing and massive computers that we have access to now, that allowed us to actually get access to much larger models with many more parameters and being able to predict more difficult things that we were not able to do before. So this is the real. And then it's the creative thing that we see in the ChatGPT versions, that like the large language models, which have two things actually. One is being able to decode what we're trying to pass them, either text, voice, or images. Actually, ChatGPT 4.0 is able to actually track your camera. You can show what are you seeing in ChatGPT? This is what you're seeing. And then after decoding what you have, then providing you some reasoning that is no more than a probability. What are the likelihood that this thing will lead to this answer or these words nested forward? That's what the ChatGPT thing is. And someone said before that we're trying to make the computers to think like human. Mm-hmm. But in the area that I work, we actually don't want them to think like a human. Not because we're fearing of the computer revolution they're going to take over. It's because the ChatGPTs of the world, they are trained on some data that might be giving you some misleading answer. Mm-hmm. And when you're trying to forecast a patrimony with so many billions in assets, you don't want them to make mistakes. You actually want them to think like a computer. Like this is the number, and you get the same number under repeated conditions, and something that you can audit also, especially if you're a publicly traded company like we are.
Yeah.
So the challenge there is having good data to train them so that you get good answers. And that is one thing that most of the large organizations are struggling with now, because you have to have that big data in a good place. We're all excited about being able to use data lakes, or now data lake houses, which is even bigger and then with more reasoning. But the reality is that the quality of the data has to be right for us to be able to make good forecasts into the future. We don't want them to have this thing called hallucinations with your data, and then you ended up making a bad decision, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I've heard about that a lot too. Yeah, awesome. Thank you for that. Makes sense. Okay, well, before we move on, I want to make sure we take a look at our poll questions. And again, if you click on that, if you haven't had a chance yet, click on that poll tab that you see and submit your responses there. And I want to bring our panel on so we can kind of have a discussion around some of the responses there. So if we can look over at one of our first questions and bring that up on the screen. Okay, we asked, what is your biggest concern with using AI? And it looks like an overwhelming amount is saying misinformation and inaccuracy. And that definitely touches on something that Christiane just said about wanting or needing that data to be very specific, you know, not wanting it to think like you mean wanting it to be like very precise. And I think that hits on the spot of misinformation and inaccuracy, especially in the field that we're working in. So that's great. So let's switch to the next question. Which AI applications have you used before? It sounds like most people are using that generative AI from the language standpoint and that chat GPT realm. I see that moving, and a lot of people aren't sure. You know, I'm not sure either. I've probably used a little bit of all of it at some point. Yeah, but computer vision. Yeah, and I think within that computer vision falls like the smart cars, right? You know, and some of those type things. Yeah, so it sounds like those language processors are definitely winning the race there. So interesting. Very good. Thank you for participating in that. Okay, let's get Robert back up here really quick. So Robert, I want to close this out with you. You know, in a previous conversation, you had brought up something that I thought was like so interesting. You had mentioned the hype cycle in technology. Can you explain to me a little bit more about the hype cycle, what you meant by that, and then how it's applicable to AI, or how like AI like folds into that?
Sure, you bet, Kim. Thanks. So one of my main responsibilities as an IT leader is really looking at value and looking at opportunities for the company, and where we could take a limited set of resources that we have with our business and IT resources and generate the most return there. And I think all of us in our decision making, we have some strategies. You know, are we an experimenter, as Jeremy was saying, and jumping in and really on a bleeding edge type of scenario, really working with new technology? Are we fast adopters? So as technology starts to crystallize and become more solid, do we jump in at that point, or are we slow adopters? Are we on that conservative end? And the hype cycle, I think anybody that's dealt with Gartner before, Gartner is a huge IT consulting firm, has probably came across the hype cycle, but I'll talk to it in generics term. It really is a kind of a representation of the maturity, the adoption, and then finally the practical application of a specific technology. So almost a mainstream adoption. And it's usually divided into phases, usually 5 phases. There's a trigger when technology hits the market. If we're talking generative AI, that would be the release of ChatGPT. And then we get the kind of the peak of the cycle of, Gartner calls it inflated expectations, but it's really, hey, this thing's going to do everything we've ever wanted. It's really a lot of publicity around it. There may be a few success stories, but what people usually don't see at that time is there's a bunch of failures going on behind the scenes. And so then we start to head down into what is kind of the trough of disillusionment. And that's really where all this experimentation and implementations, they fail to deliver that initial set of promises. A lot of times companies go out of business or they consolidate, and the ones that are left continue to work on the product to truly address some of those dissatisfactions with the early adopters. And that's where you start to see things coming out into the mainstream. Gartner Phase 4 calls it a slope of enlightenment, but really it's where the business case and the value case start to crystallize. It becomes more understood by the customer base. You start to see second and third generations of products appearing out there. And then enterprise start to buy in. They start to fund pilots. They start to invest money in the space to where we finally get to the last phase of this, which is really, they call it the plateau of productivity. I call it mainstream adoption. It's really where the value case is crystal clear. Companies have figured out how to use this technology. It's paying off, and we start to see that real adoption into mainstream. What's interesting about generative AI is that cycle has been so quick. We have seen that peak of inflated expectations several months out of ChatGPT's release. We went down into the trough of disillusionment really quick, and we're already seeing people getting value and adopting this technology very quickly. It may be some of the bigger companies out there, but I see companies like Microsoft, Adobe, they're rolling Google, they're rolling this stuff already into their platforms already. They're rolling Copilot into Word, they're rolling Firefly into Adobe's stuff. So we're seeing this cycle faster than I've ever seen one go before. It's amazing.
Yeah, I was going to ask where are we? Where's AI in the cycle? But yeah, I think it's there. I see it every time I open both of those programs that you just mentioned. They're asking me if I want to apply it or use it. I'm like, I'm not ready. Yeah, not yet. But
now machine learning, that took a lot longer to go through that cycle. That was over the course of decades, of work to get to where things were viable. So it's been really interesting to see the compression of time in this and how fast this technology is taken off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. And I know we're getting close on time, but I do want to address this one because it is a hot topic, and you saw by the poll results that it's a concern. So you as the IT director, I want to talk about security real quick. And obviously as the technology advances, security concerns are growing. And we've all heard about the potential for security risks in terms of personal information being exposed. But what other security risks are there when it comes to adopting AI?
So Christian nailed some of this, and he alluded to a lot of it. There's risks with these models based on the data that you train them on. So there is risks of bias and discrimination, misinformation, hallucinations, as he mentioned. So that's a set of risks that I think folks have got to deal with, specifically in these publicly facing large language models that have been trained on data scraped from the internet. We all know that the internet is full of misinformation and bad data, and these models reflect it. The companies are trying to work through that and train some of that out of them, but you've always got to be aware of that. The privacy concerns are definitely there from a prompting perspective on these publicly facing models, but companies are quickly addressing that, and for paid subscriptions, they're hiving off private models so that data risk from a prompting input perspective is getting less and less out there. And then there's some social impact stuff that we need to think about as a society. So automation and job loss is a big topic that people need to be thinking about. Social manipulation, things like influencing our election cycles, socioeconomic inequality. So folks that are, better positioned, capitalizing on some of these advancements, and others that are maybe in a different demographic, not able to capitalize on it. So there's a lot of things at play here from a risk perspective, and I think this thing is going to evolve just as fast as the technology is evolving.
Yeah,
So that-
hang on to those thoughts because I think you're about to like play into a lot of these hot or not topics that I want to ring off in here. And guys, okay, because we're getting toward the end, if you haven't already, make sure you submit your questions for our panel in the Q&A. The Q&A tab there, and we'll get to those in just a minute. But let's bring all the panel on so we can do a really quick hot or not round. This is something that we do every campfire session. And guys, you should have your campfire signs here. It's either a campfire flame or an extinguished flame. I'm going to rattle off a couple of topics, and you're going to hold up a sign and tell me if you think it's hot, meaning, yeah, that's something we need to be thinking about or talking about, or it's very relevant to this topic of AI, or you hold up the X sign. No, not a big deal, relevant to AI or what we're talking about or everything. So the first one that I had on here is DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And Robert, you touched on a little bit of that. Is that hot or not relative to AI? Signs? Jeremy says no. Alicia, yes. Christian, yes. And Robert, I can't see yours. Hold on, a little bit higher. Yes. Okay, so Jeremy, you're the oddball out. Why do you say no?
Look, it's like accuracy. Everybody makes all this hullabaloo about accuracy. Just adjust your model temperature. Adjust it to 0. Look at what happens. Adjust it to 100. I would encourage everyone, before we buy into this doom and this kind of philosophizing, I would encourage everyone to go and get an AI model, even a small one, and start to play with it and start to use it. And you'll see that it's a lot more controllable than maybe we let on. And it's a lot more determinative. And so I don't really buy into a lot of the doom cycle because I use it every day. And it's controllable.
But as it refers to DEI, though, I think like about it from like a, is there equity in access to, the advancements of it, right?
Yes, without question.
That's where like I would see that there could be some concerns. Is anybody else with me on that end or have any other?
I would agree.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, for an example, you just have to look at what Gemini did with Google. They had a complete bias on their image generation system that you ask for something and they tried to overcompensate on the biases they thought they were going to be, and they went extremely to the other side. So there are still problems with the technology. I don't say we're doomed, but I think we have to pay attention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just be mindful.
I'd agree.
Yeah, great, good. What about
Use Google.
Intellectual property? Hot or not?
Yes.
Yeah. Hot. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, got to protect it. And the one thing I saw out there was Adobe definitely getting ahead of the process, trying to create like a certificate program for their creators to put anything to protect their assets out there. What about automated land management? And I think this relates to like, the job satisfaction or job loss even field, hot or not?
I think it's hot a little bit because people are concerned about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a little bit. It's not complete. People are concerned, but I think that is mostly what I think is that we are going to have to adapt and switch our skills to work with AI more than what we used to do it before, that we did it all on our own software or manually operated. And I think that it's only about the understanding in helping to interpret the results from AI. I think that's the main thing, that we need to develop skills and understanding what would be a good quality data to input or to inform the AI algorithm that you are using. So I think that we need to switch our skills to that.
Makes sense. And we had some mixed reactions here. Who wants to respond on the not hot?
I would say it's not hot right now. It might be in 10 years.
Yeah.
But right now, we're still far from actually replacing what our foresters do in the field. I mean,
Yeah,
with
I would
management.
agree.
Yeah.
Not
I
there
would
yet.
agree. You're
Yeah.
still going to have humans that need to make decisions, and whether we can automate some of the more tedious parts of that job, you're still, those complex decision makings are still going to be humans in a lot of these areas. So I don't think this is as big a risk right now.
Yeah.
And
in
besides,
this space.
it's not because we couldn't do that with AI. We don't have enough good sensors to actually tell us the whole story, what's going on in the field.
Right.
So it's not an AI limitation; it's more on the sensor side.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
So it's from the data side then.
Yeah. That's what 100%.
But I think that the concerns are now because people are thinking what is going to happen with my jobs later.
Mhm.
So I think that for now they need to start, especially for the younger generations that are probably getting hit in the market, the job market in a few years. They need to start understanding those things more. Yeah.
Good. Awesome. And I know we're getting close on time here. So again, I don't know if this thing is just going to cut us off completely or if it's going to let us keep going. So we'll see what happens here. But I want to make sure that we do get to some audience questions. So everybody stay on here. I'm going to see if I can pull some up here. I do have a question for Robert that came through. It says, what are some specific examples of AI applications that have already shown promise in improving forestry and land management processes?
I think that's probably a question for the rest of the panel here. My expertise, I think I'm is really in our business. We've got machine learning algorithms in our sawmills, and so we're using that technology to automate processes in there. On the forestry side of the fence, we're really taking more of a fast adopter in our small niche kind of industry. It's been tough to see applications come off the stack that are viable for us. So we're in a little bit of a fast adopter. I would defer to the panel here to answer that.
Anybody want to chime in? Again, the question was, any applications that are already showing promise in improving forestry and land management processes?
No, because we lack the sensors. I mean, if we could ever figure out how to get the data, it'd be a totally different conversation. But today,
and we are working on that part. Yeah.
Well,
eventually.
To get that
if you
part.
think the interception between drone technology for
Yes.
looking at the counting trees at the establishment or with inventory, that is one thing you can do. It's image recognition. It's simple. It's there. A lot of companies are trying to actually do that and trying to replace traditional inventories. But that's not going to happen in the short term because we're not able to see the quality of the trees by just looking at an image. So that's not going to happen here in the States. Not yet.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. I have one that says AI requires a lot of energy to run the supercomputers. Is the limitation a factor in universal adoption?
Not at all.
I'm with Jeremy there because you can always chip into the already trained models. Someone already a big investment like the Llama from Facebook. They released the whole engine for someone else to actually add your own data and use that. And for that, you don't have to invest the exorbitant amount of money that the people from ChatGPT or Facebook or Gemini or with Google are doing. We're using that information, those models for our benefit without actually having to invest in that much.
And to speak to the doom cycle and all the hype, everybody says, oh, we need 1 gigawatt data centers. Sure, great. Have a gigawatt data center. We have the ability, especially in our industry, to create negative carbon, low carbon energy sources right next to where these data centers are going. Not that hard to build a big biomass boiler, not that hard to plug into, I mean, heck, paper mills have been doing it forever. It is from my perspective, yet one more, it's a naive thing that people like to talk about, but when you actually get into it, we have all the options that we need to solve that problem.
Okay, awesome. Alicia, how can AI technologies be applied to monitor and protect biodiversity, especially in fragile ecosystems, threatened species habitats?
Well, it's the AI is the same that we mentioned before. For that, we need sensors that can give us more information. So for biodiversity, that's a really tricky one to do with remote sensing, for example, unless we have very, very high resolution, but not only spatial resolution, but also spectral resolution. So with the spatial resolution, we get very small size pixels that can give us details on different plant species on the ground. But that is still something that is related only probably to the canopy of the forest. We don't know what is happening in between that big tree and the ground, how many other plants or species are in there. So biodiversity is a little bit hard to do with remote sensing, even though we have tried and we have models that have some sort of an accuracy that we deal with that, because that's as good as it gets to do it from the air perspective instead of going to the field and doing everything. But I think from the AI perspective, we probably can do a lot. We just need to have more data that can help us to identify those things, and that more data has to have those benefits of very high resolution from the spectral point of view and from the spatial point of view.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Okay, I want to try to get to one more because I know we're over time, but this one was for the full panel. So it's they're asking, please discuss if or how AI will impact silviculture and harvest operations, or is AI going to more directly positively or negatively the more technical side of the business, i.e. inventory, GIS, or data management? So how will AI impact silviculture and harvest operations? How about we go there first? Anybody want to chime in? That was for the full panel.
I mean, there's autonomous vehicle technology now that is being tested in semi-dry. I mean, we could see a hauling component of that. I think that would come before a harvesting component. So I could see that impacting them at some point as we get an aged workforce out here. It's tougher and tougher to kind of keep iron on the ground. So that's one way I could see it impacting it.
So yeah, so from the vehicle point of view, it's very easy to utilize cameras that can give information, real-time information as they're operating for harvesting. From the silviculture point of view, you just have to do monitoring through time also, where it's not just one time as harvesting might be. So you need to have a combination probably of different sensors. What we tend to do in remote sensing is utilize LiDAR to get information about heights and some modeling of biomass or volume, depending on what is our parameter that we're trying to get. And we also can follow with optical data. We can follow the changes in the vegetation. So we, for example, now that we have hyperspectral cameras, I have one in one of my drones. And with that, the idea is to start modeling nitrogen content in those trees, in those plants, so we can think about ahead for silviculture planning. But this is all still kind of in research phase. Although having said that, I think that because everything is evolving quicker than it used to be in terms of technology, it might get to the point of being in operations quicker than, before. Things would take 10 years to actually be able to be implemented. Probably now we see that in agriculture, things get implemented quickly. So hopefully in forestry, we'll see something like that. That's
nice.
So let me just give one quick anecdote. And I know we're over time, so I'll be fast.
Yeah,
talking about the great tragedy that Buckeye turned out to be. Very few people know or understand why Buckeye back in the day planted all those slash pine trees. Why was that important? Slash pine is uniquely good at making filter pulp. It's got a cell wall that orients the right way. It is noticeably better at filtration than any other wood species we know of. The Buckeye folks knew that way back in the 50s, and that's why part of the reason they planted all those slash pines. IP sometimes figures it out with some of their mills that have really good filtration pulp. They don't really understand why. The fact that we have so much knowledge that's being lost from I'm third generation, so it's being lost from our parents and grandparents that we just run over in pursuit of this kind of extractive land management. I'm personally very hopeful that AI can help us understand better some of the decisions that our grandfathers made that were made for a good reason, and hopefully kind of come back to some of that.
I share that vision with Jeremy. There is so much information out there in research, in publications, in documents that right now we're suffering from being blind because we're not able to read everything and learn everything. We're biased towards whatever we were taught in college. Our professors didn't know everything, so some things are left aside. With AI, we might be able to actually have an agent that is able to tell us, you know what, we try this. You know what, this is something that already happened. That is going to improve silviculture for sure.
Right.
And the second one is one that is right on my desk here. Is how do you predict what the weather is going to be doing, so that you can forecast what the forest is going to be doing. We have limitations on how we can model weather moving forward. With AI, time series forecasting, we're reducing those limitations, and we're able to do a better job in predicting what is going to happen with the forest. When you're able to do that, you're able to improve your management regimes so that you are targeting specific markets if that's what you're trying to do. And I think that is going to be a big help, both having the memory and having the future forecastability.
Love that. Thank you for your input. Any last or final comments from the panel? Awesome. This has been so helpful. I know that we ran over a little bit of time, but for those who are still on here, it's good for you that you hung around, because that means less people to compete with for our giveaways. And so if our producer will go ahead and spin our fun little digital wheels, we'll see if this works and see if we can give away a couple things. We've got some pickleball sets here. Oh yeah, look at those beautiful things. Let's see, we've got 3 winners here. Look at that. Okay, if you see your name up there, we will contact you later to get those sent out to you. So congratulations. But hang tight, we've got a couple more things. So on to the next item. Nice zip up hoodie. The snuggle is real. And our winners are with those 3 names there. Awesome. Congratulations. We'll get those out to you. And then we've got one more item. I believe they are awesome Campfire t-shirts. Nice. And our 3 winners there. Awesome, guys. We appreciate it so much. Hey, listen, this has been such an informative and awesome session. I want to give a big thanks to everybody on our panel for joining us today and helping us get a better understanding of all things AI, and especially as it relates to our industry. I hope that everybody has gotten as much out of this as I have and found it so helpful. If you've tuned in late, or if you want to, go back and watch this later, we're going to have this recording available. I know a lot of folks have messaged me throughout this and asked for that. Yes, we will have the recording available afterwards up on our LinkedIn and also Orbis's YouTube channel for viewing. So we'll put out some notes there once you can access that and have that available. We'll also, if you need any contact information for any of our panelists or further information, feel free to reach out to us and we can share that with you. But again, thank you for joining, and stay tuned for more topics and more sessions that we'll put out. We'll hope to see you around there. But for now, we're going to put this fire out and we will see you next time. Thank you so much, guys. Have a good one.